3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments Silicon Reviews. This week we have another two games to handle, and in seemingly emerging pattern, one game was handled by the entire team and one was handled by me myself. That's just the realities of code distribution for you. Anyway, First up is Ruin of the Reckless. If you recall, we did an interview about this just this past Wednesday. And if you want to find out more about, well, not just the nuts and bolts of the game, but how it is conceptualized and all that detail, you can go listen to it in the archives. But for those who missed said interview, Ruin of the Reckless is, well, another in the seemingly endless array of roguelike variants that exist on the indie scene. I think I mentioned this back in our Tumbleseed review, but
although as far as roguelikes go, this is one of them. It's not like I'm saying it's perfectly traditional one, but this is one of the more traditional ones we've had in a while.
True, but it's still off the beaten path. Like considering it's all real-time combats, and it's billed as a brawler.
Yeah, it's like a brawly beat 'em uppy roguelike, but it's still more traditional in the sense of you're going through a dungeon. It's not just procedurally generated for the heck of it.
Fair enough assessment. It's not just like random elements. Dungeon and permadeath are the only signifiers here. This definitely is a closer relative to rogue and roguelikes than, say, Tumbleseed was. Then again, Tumbleseed was about as far as I think you can get with the roguelike concept while still technically still being a roguelike.
I'm not even sure if I'd be that generous.
It's like, that's important to keep in mind. But yeah, so in terms of like feature set and design, if you've played, not just say Rogue or like one of the mystery dungeon games, you'll be at home here, sort of. Like,
yeah, the mechanical moment-to-moment gameplay is kind of twin-stick brawlery.
Yeah, it's also really close to, say, Rogue platformers like Rogue Legacy. While at the same time, I haven't exactly seen this particular concoction of roguelike elements. I mean, I suppose, this is the really interesting thing that's going on in the indie scene. Like, the roguelike genre is so saturated now. It's developing in very unique directions, if only because you gotta find some way to stand out. Although I'm not exactly sure how much this game stands out outside of its preferred genre of brawling. Not only is the design pretty familiar, the art style, the sound is pretty typical faux retro stuff.
Yeah, the art style. I mean, not the exact sprite design, but it looks a little bit. Crap, what's it called? The Hyperlight Drifter-ish, or even a little bit like Kamiko on the Wii U, although, or not Wii U, Switch, but it's that very it's pixel. It's a little bit higher res than most of the other ones.
Yeah, I'd say
but
if
very
there was
flat coloring and
yeah, if there were if I had to place I don't think it was going for like a deliberate retro aesthetic. Like I think it's more just sprite art. But if it because there's nothing I see here really speaks to invoking a bygone era. It's just kind of you know the art style of the times that oftentimes gets confused for retro, but is not necessarily retro. And believe me, this is actually the sort of thing that can piss off pixel artists. Yeah.
Like, it's not 8-bit. You have way too many different colors.
Yeah. I mean, like, if I had to place it looks like a Super Nintendo game. Like,
it looks 16-bit, but I would say that the aesthetic is definitely the flat color aesthetic is very is
maybe
modern.
Maybe a Turbo Graphics game. Like I said, the thing of it is it's not that colorful. Like maybe but it's not dark enough to be a Genesis game either.
Right. I guess the thing that I'm thinking is that there was a period where color in games always involved more depth of shading, like the increase in graphics, whereas this has fairly fine lines and some highish detail line works, but the coloring is pretty flat.
Right. Like I said, I think this is more a sprite art game than any true throwback to like it's not a retro brawler. Yeah. I don't think we really asked about that in the interview, if I'm recalling correctly. I don't think it came up. Like,
I don't think it did either.
Yeah. Like maybe we should have asked, but in all honesty, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, it's not really trying to be a replication of like 16-bit brawlers because there's no 16-bit game that looked like this or played like this. This is definitely a very modern downloadable game. Take that as you will. I mean, and if you're watching the video version of this, you can see what the game looks like. And so here's, I think, where we all are on Ruin of the Reckless. And that is, it's a pretty fun game, but
it's really ass hard.
As you'd expect from something that was derived from Rogue.
Yeah.
Yep. I fairly regularly have it happen. Like, I've never made it past the 5th floor out of, 20?
Yeah.
And it's pretty reliable that somewhere within the first 5 floors, there will be a floor where you just spawn surrounded by, 3 dozen raccoons that will kill you.
This has happened to me as well. It's like, though, keep in mind, this game isn't designed. It's all procedural generation. Although, patterns do emerge. Like, the game does like having a raccoon floor. Be sure to have your magic ready if you can, because that's probably the only way you're surviving.
Yeah, having a better magic than the one you start with, or having one of the special orbs that, there's one that if you get it, whenever you get hit, it causes you to get struck with lightning massively that destroys everything around you. I found that to be pretty useful.
Basically, you have something that can hit in waves, basically.
So, I suppose it should be mentioned, even though it calls itself a brawler, you're not actually using your fists here. You do use weapons, like your default weapon's a dagger, but you'll get different weapons that do different things. Like some have
during the tutorial, you get a chaos card, which is this game's meta progression item that causes you to start with, instead of a dagger, you start with a mini rocket punch.
Right. And
It's a punch with a lot of impact on it. And then early on, you can get lots of different things. You can get like, one of the weirdest ones I got is it's a punch, but it gives you a punch with an enormous metal fist as big as you are.
Right.
There's also like a scythe or a lance or a rapier that lets you dash forward while you're attacking.
Yeah, and some of these weapons can be tricky because they have weird arcs, or you'll dash. So you do have to keep in mind what you got equipped.
Yeah, they all have different speeds and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's the weapon you're going to be using most of the time because your magic is pretty limited.
I don't know, you get a decent number of charges, especially if you get baby mode.
Right. It'll work out for you, just so long as you don't spam it. You cannot. Yeah. Let's see. Other items include orbs, which are floating around and will imbue you with various attributes like being able to lightning strike. It's one of my favorites. Regeneration is probably the most useful.
Yeah, regeneration just causes you to gain 1 health every time you go up a floor, which, since you have 5 health by default and health up power-ups are pretty uncommon.
Yeah. Also worth noting, you can use orbs as weapons because if you punch them, they'll explode. And
yeah,
keep in mind,
you kind of have a choice if you either pick it up or you hit it. Except it's not always a choice because sometimes you hit it by accident.
Or sometimes the enemies hit it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Also worth noting, there is a checkpoint in the progression if you get to the first shop,
which is right before the 3rd floor.
Yeah, it's like, I'll be honest, I found this to be a pretty useless checkpoint since we're only talking the 3rd floor. Like,
well, one thing that I noticed is that when it dropped me there, when I was first playing before I turned on baby mode, I had more money when I started there than I did when I got there.
I said pretty useless, not completely useless. It's more, I think the checkpoint would have been better served, say, at the 2nd shop.
Or if there were a few, like you could start at like the last shop that you got to, although that might get too close to the end. Yeah, there's a shop about every 3 or 4 floors.
The important thing to keep in mind is one of the reasons why this game has such punishing difficulty is not just because of its roots. It's because, all things told, it's a pretty short game. Mm-hmm. Like, I think there's about 20 floors in total, if I'm remembering correctly, if even that. Admittedly,
check the map next time I get to it.
Yeah, I'm like, it's not that long of a game if you can get through it. I mean, that's another like defining trait of roguelites. Even like Tumbleseed had this. Like, if you can, handle the mechanics and the difficulty, you can get through it pretty quickly. And I'm pretty sure speedrunning is a vital aspect of this game, as it is many in this day and age.
Well, like this one, you have a timer each floor that if you don't make it out before the timer, then
thing. A lot of roguelikes have that.
Yeah.
The stage, in this case, it's the stage literally starts blowing up around you, which is amusingly blunt, shall we say?
Like, I'll be honest.
Sometimes it's just the wind starts blowing and it'll knock you away, or
and this is pretty much the primary reason I've only put in like 2-3 hours in the game. Not just because of the punishing difficulty, but because its gameplay design and everything really screams short-term play. Like, this is the kind of thing you pick up for a half an hour, enjoy, and then go off and do something else. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, it's not the kind of game unless you were really, really into it, that you'd be spending like 3 hours on it. And honestly, I I would like to see a portable version of this, because I think this would really work on, say, the Nintendo Switch, or maybe not 3DS, but it's the kind of gameplay style and everything that lends itself well to the portable school of design. Let's see. Other things, you do get potions of various merits, health potions, charge potions, scrolls that will have very powerful attacks.
Yeah, all of those count as the consumable slot, which is one of the ones that you'll be seeing a lot more. Well, because they're usable up, that you get those more often than you get some of the other ones. Although I think you see more ability orbs than potions, which is weird. I guess if you want to be really selective, that helps. But yeah, there's also trinkets, and I forget what they're called, but something that gives you a special action.
Right. The most common one I encountered there was the Zenny shooter, that basically allowed you to throw the currency.
As a pretty powerful weapon.
It is.
Yeah,
but
there's
it's
also like Mega Slash and Teleport and Ether Lash or something is the thing they give you in the tutorial that lets you literally make a whip to go across gaps. I don't know how useful that is because I never found any gaps that needed it outside of the tutorial.
Yeah, I'm like, I found that in the main dungeon, but I never used it.
Yeah, I've seen it inside the main dungeon once, but it never did anything.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe in the upper floors. I couldn't say.
Yeah, that seems like a thing where there would be, at some point, there would be treasures that you need that to get. Or that, or one of the other things, like the flying boots or something.
Right, and also worth noting is you can play as two characters.
Yeah, there's a dude and a lady.
There are no differences. Like, they are just avatars. Like, one isn't stronger, the other isn't speedier. Your typical gender differential. Like, the dude will be much stronger, but the girl will be faster. None of that's here. It's just, like, say if Naka ever played this game, he would play the lady because that's what he does. Nothing
and
more.
yeah, and there's also a 2-player mode, which I don't think any of us did because it's local only, I think.
Yeah, it's local only. So I don't think anyone here had anyone to play with. So,
right.
I mean, that's kind of the thing. When people do local only on a computer, it's kind of a hard sell.
Unless you have two controllers or something, and even then it can be a little awkward.
I mean, it's appreciated, but yeah, like, local co-op has always been awkward on a computer. Like, it's never not going to be awkward. That's kind of one of the reasons why online multiplayer and LANs and shit like that developed on the PC side first. To kind of get around the awkwardness
of sharing a monitor.
Yeah.
Like, I will say the prevalence of, like, the living room PCs getting higher, but not high enough.
Yeah.
It's
just, and they mentioned why there's no online multiplayer, even though there really should be. It's because their focus was on local always. And by the time that they thought to implement the online multiplayer, it was too late.
And again, that would be more logical on a console, but...
Yeah. It's worth noting that this game is currently only on the PC. They're working on the Mac and Linux versions, if I'm recalling correctly, but I'm like, they're figuring out exactly how to handle console/handheld versions. I.e., are they going to do it themselves, or are they going to hire a porting house, like our friends over at Abstraction Games, for example, who bring various games to various consoles for a living. I mean, we'll see what happens there. Let's see. Outside of the Chaos cards, there are other elements of meta progression. More characters will show up in your in the hub world or the hub floor. Like when I got I unlocked this stuffed animal, for example, and there's a store off to the side.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
I believe that comes unlocked, as you get higher, or I presume that is. It could also be a random unlock because, roguelike.
Yeah, there's a lot of random.
Yeah. Like I said, it's definitely adhering to the random aspect of the roguelike. Also on the Chaos cards, what they do isn't necessarily to make the game easier, because I have 4 of them. 3 of them make the game easier. 1 of them makes it harder.
Yeah, at the beginning, there are 3 kinds of Chaos cards. There are easier, harder, and balanced ones.
Right.
During the tutorial, you get a balanced one that makes you start out with some equipment.
Right.
And there's one that makes the floors easier, and there's one that makes the floors harder.
Right, and there are other aspects that will add, like I have a card that will add more hit points per when you start out. Instead of 99, I have 110, for example.
When returning to the hub area after doing terribly, dying 16 to 20 times without getting past the 4th floor, I talked to the penguin dude, who is your tutorial dude, and he gave me the baby card, which gives you more life and more money to start with, and gives you more capacity for orbs. It didn't help much.
No, it's even on reduced difficulty, this game is still really fucking difficult. And that really is the core of the game. Whether or not that strikes your fancy, I suppose that kind of depends on how into roguelikes you are. Honestly, I think the bigger problem is, in spite of its unique genre, nothing about this game really stands out for me. Outside of the brawling component, everything here feels like I've seen this in some other game. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but it is there. Let's see. The music. Once again, the music is faux retro chiptune affairs. Really adrenaline pumping soundtracks, as you'd expect from a brawler. And I think they said that the soundtrack was available independent of the. Let me just check 1 second here. Come on. Let's see. Is the soundtrack here? Yeah, here we go. These. The downloadable content is the soundtrack and the collector's edition art book. So about $8 for the extra stuff. It's not too bad.
Especially if you're an art book whore like I am.
Yeah. And $5 for a soundtrack. For this soundtrack, that's acceptable. Probably the biggest price caveat here I have is $15 for this. I'm
it's a little bit basic for that, but I guess if you're the kind of person who likes replaying roguelikes a lot,
you
probably get good usage out of it.
Yeah, I'm this one's hard for me to recommend at $15. I'd say wait for a sale. Wait for it to be $10. I think that's a better price for this. Like all in all, a solid if derivative experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything works well, everything flows well. It's just your ass is gonna get kicked a lot, and if you don't like that, I would not recommend this, like at all.
Yeah, this is not a game for people who want to be able to beat it in their first try, or 7 or 12.
No, you've got to you've got to be persistent. I mean, I guess that's the most old school thing about this, and not so much Rogue as I'm thinking stuff like the Karate Kid for the NES, a game that was only 4 levels, but they're like the hardest 4 levels you can imagine. So that's going to take some time to crack.
And you will definitely learn to fear and loathe the goddamn derp-faced raccoons.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They are, by the way, the Steam icons, so they knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any last thoughts on Ruin of the Reckless here?
I was gonna say this really doesn't feel like it should be a roguelike, because they mentioned in the interview they wanted to make this a brawler, and I personally think they should have went with that idea, like a linear brawler instead of a roguelike.
Yeah. I will say though, if it were like a straight brawler, I definitely couldn't recommend it at 15.
Yeah, the combat doesn't have quite enough variety to merit that, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and say what you will, but randomization will keep things fresh to a certain extent.
Well, it's also kind of, I'm just kind of burned out at roguelikes at this point because we've done so many.
I know, but like I said, it's just something that comes with the territory. Like, you know, like there.
Have you considered not reviewing games?
Like, yeah. It's kind of like being tired of Metroidvania type games that they're just gonna keep on coming.
Or for AAA reviewers being tired of first-person shooters.
Yeah. It's like, you know, we got an interview in 2 weeks over a game called Dead Cells. There's another roguelike of interesting variety. It's a roguelike Metroidvania hybrid.
Okay,
that could be interesting.
Yeah.
Although, that's a hard thing to combine because Metroidvanias, unless they're just talking about that kind of playstyle, because Metroidvanias usually have a lot of progression-based upgrades that would be hard to pull off in a roguelike.
It's not the first time I've seen this, or the first time we feel there was that game Chasm that we did an interview about a few years ago. Still hasn't come out, but that was aiming to be like a semi procedural content Castlevania homage thing. And then there's Arcus Odyssey.
I mean, I guess if you want to be technical, Rogue Legacy is kind of like that.
Yeah. But as far as reviewing Dead Cells, aside from not getting codes, it's currently in early access,
so we wouldn't be reviewing it yet anyway.
No, not until it comes out. But the point is, yeah, even if we're tired of roguelikes, the roguelikes keep coming.
Mm-hmm. Minor quality nitpicks in this. I noticed some typos that I mostly comma weirdness in the introduction text stuff. You don't get much text past the early game, and there were a couple of weird glitches in the tutorial area where you can kind of pass through / around gates, but nothing that really hurt the game. Just weird things I noticed.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think that'll about do it for Ruin of the Reckless. Be sure to tune in about a half an hour from now as we review, or rather, I will review Mages of Mistralia, because once again, this is one of those games where we got the one code. So I'm the one who takes the first code because I'm the one who handles all this shit.
Mhm.
So,
And I'd consider picking it up, but $25 is a little steep.
yeah, this game is kind of expensive. And it's also doing that. It also does the. I'm looking at the PR here. It's $25. It's 25 euros. Don't do that, developers and publishers. Like,
Even if they are kind of close now, it's still not the same.
Yeah, it's like $1 does not equal to €1 or £1. Like, European purchasers get really mad at that because they are paying more than we are for it. So, anyway, with that in mind, until next time, I wish you good gaming.